All right, we'll call the environmental service meeting to order with the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Approval of the minutes of the January 20th meeting. If no one's seen anything,
I'll make a motion to approve.
motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Public comments. Anybody upstairs, Tim? All right. Anybody? Nobody online that you?
Anyone online want to make public comment?
Okay. Close public comment. If a committee has a conflict, you can raise your hand when you get there. Receipt of information of supervisors not seated. Anybody on, Tim?
No, it's just Jason and Greg Marston.
Okay. Apple River Solar.
Good morning. Tim, did the town of Beaver, were they going to join us?
They're going to try to.
Try to?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out on the attendees list if they join.
Good morning. I'm just here to represent, introduce Kara Heffelbauer.
You got it.
Congratulations. Kara's here with her colleague Eric, and they're here to basically address and re-examine all of our concerns. If you remember, we've been looking at this for a couple of months. One of the goals we could consider for this meeting is to work through those concerns, learn more about our developer's perspective. I know there's a cleaner, more updated copy of the joint development agreement that includes that educational fund. And we have that up, so we'll bring that up. So we have a different version from what's in your packet. And Kara will talk about that. But a goal for today could be that we would make a recommendation to the full county board at the February 18th meeting. Coincidentally, today is the deadline to get anything on that February 18th county board agenda. So that's a possible outcome or goal for today, is to work with Kara since she's here and finalize that JDA to the point where you're comfortable enough with it to forward it on to the full county board. The PSC permitting process, we talked about this at length. We've signed up as an intervener. Malia will be our representative. And that is scheduled for later in the year. But one thing we do know, more or less, there's a pre-hearing, which is scheduled either in early to mid-March. So that's coming up. So you see this time frame we're working with here. We'd like to be at the table for that as well. And you might ask, well, what if we don't sign the JDA? Well, it could be considered a best practice to memorialize this agreement in writing. Having a signed JDA would be a good practice to memorialize this project. So with that said, introduce Kara. Come on up, Kara.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for having us. Kara Heffelbauer with National Grid Renewables, so formerly Kara Bakey and formerly known as Geronimo Energy. As you recall, when I was here last time, we were undergoing our name change, and it was the day of. So exciting to be back here again. If at any point you have any trouble hearing me, please tell me to speak up, and I'll try to yell a little bit louder through my mask. So With that, I have Eric Callisto with me. He is with Michael Best. He is our counsel representing us throughout our process with the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. So he is a wealth of knowledge through everything related to that. And Eric, I'll actually just let you introduce yourself and give a little background.
Yeah, no, as Kara said, my name is Eric Callisto. I'm with the law firm. It's called Michael Best and Friedrich. We have about 4 offices throughout Wisconsin. I'm based in the Madison office. I spend most of my time working with Kara and clients like her on a variety of energy projects, and almost exclusively in front of the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, which, as Kara said, and as you know, which is where this project will ultimately proceed and move through the approval process. Thank you for having us.
Excellent. So Eric's a good resource as we go throughout this presentation. If there are specific questions on that process, and if anyone wants to ask him and utilize him, he's here. So he knows a lot more than I do about it. So with that, in speaking with Tim and Bob prior to this meeting, they had kind of wanted us to walk through the questions that we provide, or the questions that the committee provided and that we provided some answers to, and walk through them, as well as walking through the joint development agreement. The PowerPoint itself, you can flip a couple slides in. Next one, just will have, I have the maps, and we'll actually just leave that one up. The overall footprint, also the layout as filed with the Public Service Commission, and then a slide with some breakdowns on the revenue. So really just some more visual points as we walk through the joint development agreement, if it's helpful to reference those things. So with that being said, does everyone have handy the question sheet? Was that in the packet, Bob, or I can just read?
I believe so. So this is in your packet. It's the list of concerns you all have and then their response to them. Does everyone have a packet? Who needs one? 2? We can pull it out. Would that help, Doug? Just pull it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. And then I'll just be a little more formal too and just kind of read through things so then as well. So the first question that we were asked was, who is the owner of Apple River LLC, and what's our business model around that? So Apple River Solar LLC is owned by National Grid Renewables. So all of our projects are standalone entities. This is consistent with the industry as a whole. So every project has its own interconnection application. Every project has its own land use permit. Every project has its own driveway permits. All of our projects are, again, those standalone entities. They each have their own interconnection positions and things that are held to them that are unique to that project. Each project has its own insurance. So we are the current owner of Apple River Solar LLC, and this kind of ties to, I think, some of the other questions that may flow through, including that second one, where if the project is sold, who has to adhere to the JDA, and it is outlined in Section 8 of the Joint Development Agreement. But further, everything that comes with Apple River Solar is held to by Apple River, or the owner of Apple River Solar. So all of those permits, all of the the interconnection positions, all the obligations, all of the leases. And that's part of why we have that as a standalone, because it would get very muddied if National Grid Renewables, if every single project was named National Grid Renewables and every single permit was in the name National Grid Renewables. You can see where that would get very complicated to distinguish between individual projects and the specific permits and obligations that they must adhere to, as each project is very unique.
Can I jump in here as well, just to throw in a little color? So the commission, the Public Service Commission, has taken up about 5 projects of this size so far across the state. And recognizing that, as Kara said, the projects often change hands, the commission, if it approves the project, will put in a specific order point that says all of the conditions that the commission orders as to the current owner, Apple River, are also a requirement for anybody who subsequently takes ownership of the project. there's multiple layers of protection to ensure that not only what you contractually agreed to through the JDA is adhered to, but also whatever the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin orders will also be required as part of the new ownership model.
And that was kind of a block of question themes for ownership. Are there any additional questions on that piece before we move on throughout the document? All right. Segueing to the third bullet point then. So we weren't exactly sure what PCA meant. I remember that being a point where we were like, is that Polk County or were we maybe a typo?
Yeah, I think you meant to say PSC.
Okay, PSC. Okay. Okay. So, and we can expand on that a little bit more. So essentially, and Eric, help me here, but the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin won't hold the surety. Correct. Yep. So it would be held by local government. So basically, we go through the process we go through with them is outlining the decommissioning plan, all the components, costs associated with the implementation of that plan, but they don't actually hold a surety. That would be, in this case, Polk County, that would be the holders of that surety. And that's another reason why it's important, and we see it valuable to have that joint development agreement, because there is a section in the proposed joint development agreement that outlines the surety and the scale for that as well. And that would be in section 6.
Could I ask, can we ask questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
On the panel decommissioning, I've been reading a lot about what's happening now with the wind turbines that are decommissioned and the fact that they can't recycle. So they're burying them all over the country in big pits because they don't have anything else to do with them. What happens with the solar panels? It says, they're going to salvage as much as they can, and then it goes to a solid waste facility. That means they get buried somewhere?
Yeah, so the preferred end of life use is the recycling or refurbishing of the panel. And what I can tell you right now from our operational solar projects is if we have panels that, just kind of bunk out, or, every once in a while we have contractors in there that are doing the mowing and forget that they're mowing grass around solar panels and clip the solar panel edge and, render them no longer operable. They are being recycled now. So that's what we're doing now. That's what we foresee for the future for them as well. Of course, 20, 25 years from now, who knows entirely what that industry will look like. Our decommissioning plan outlines the preferred method, what's being implemented now, what we can do. The point that I wanted to highlight specifically with the panels that we're proposing, and is that there is the ability for them to go to a waste facility, and they do not exceed EPA thresholds for not being suitable for a landfill, because that often becomes a sticking point with agencies or different places as when we come in. Is it it's that counter side of it. The preference is to reduce, reuse, recycle. But if we can't go to a landfill, then we still, look bad. So the information that I provided is we prefer to reduce, reuse, recycle. But if we had to, we still could go to a landfill because they're safe to go to a landfill. So that was the emphasis that I wanted to make there in adding that point in. While it's not preferred and we're going the recycle route, and that's what we've outlined in our decommissioning plan, we still could send these panels to a landfill if we had to. They're safe. It would be fine that they could go there, like common household waste, if needed.
But they would just stay there then because they wouldn't dissolve or anything. They just stay buried.
I mean, everything breaks down eventually over time. I don't know the exact half-life, quarter-life cycle of everything in there. But yes.
Regarding the decommissioning, if after the first year this whole thing goes south and the 20% surety bond is there, who pays for the rest of it? The decommissioning, is it the local governments, is it the PSC?
Yeah, so I can jump in on this one. So the commission has in front of it the decommissioning plan, perhaps one that you're referencing. They will ultimately approve that decommissioning plan as part of the approval of this project if they approve it, if they approve the project. The commission then, in part to address the issue that I talked about earlier, which is the potential transfer of ownership, which is quite common in these scenarios, retains jurisdiction over everything that it has approved in this case, including the decommissioning plan. So whoever takes on ownership, or you said like a year from now, let's assume that the project is sold to somebody else a year from now, whoever takes on that project takes on the obligation of the decommissioning plan. And if in the hypothetical you gave, they don't pay that, then the commission has jurisdiction over that matter. So the commission will then bring them back in to address what is obviously a problem. And I'll defer to Kara as to how that may or may not go in terms of transfer of ownership. I don't think we're at that spot with the project yet. But if at some point the project is transferred to a utility, for example, there's even additional strength on that because the utility is a fully regulated entity. So think up here of Xcel Energy in this part of the state, a fully regulated utility that really can do very little without Public Service Commission of Wisconsin approval. So again, there's multiple layers of protection to ensure that we want to avoid the situation you're concerned about where the panels just lie there and nobody's addressing them.
But I'm gonna follow up on that because at least I didn't get the answer. So up until the 4th anniversary, when 50%, we're going to only have 20% of the cost of decommissioning in a bond through realistically the first 4 years. So 3 years into this project, clean burning coal appears and makes solar obsolete. Who's taking the panels out? Who's paying for it? The county's only got 20% of the money sitting in a bond. Apple River Solar, be it Apple River Solar or somebody who has bought it, is defunct. National Grid is gone out of the solar business. There's no company left owning it. There's nobody behind it. Who pays for the panels to be taken off the land, the cement to be taken off of the land, the fences to be taken down? Who pays for all of that?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I mean, if the company goes defunct, then it's tough to imagine a situation like that. But there's other remedies. There's legal remedies to go after somebody, even if they are technically no longer a going concern. But the commission itself will have the authority to enforce on whatever entity still exists to do that. The purpose of the decommissioning fund, as you suggested, is to try and put money in escrow, in bond, in some fashion to address that. And there's a reasonable, commercially reasonable timeline for doing that, which we've actually escalated or advanced at the request of the committee. So there are legal remedies to go up against an entity that still exists. I do get your point that if something goes completely belly up, there may be concerns. But this is a legally enforceable document. The CPCN that would be granted by the commission in this case is a legally enforceable document. Both of those have obligations for the owner to decommission when they're done with the project. That obligation is there whether they're done with the project because it's at the end of its useful life or they're just done with the project. Either way, it's a decommissioning obligation.
Additional backstop to that, within our project and our leases, we also have decommissioning provisions with our landowners that require on very similar timeframes from which we either stop producing power, whether that be because our power purchase contract is up or if we just decided to stop producing power, that would also come into play, and they marry together as well. So it's that continually compounding, and the scenario which was presented is very much a doomsday with regard to the project and all of the entities and the operation. In the event that it's a utility owning it, as you see with their resource plans. Alliant just announced yesterday their closure of a coal plant and the target for that by 2024. They don't just flip the switch and shut it off. They need to get approval to filter out plants from their fleet. So if it's a utility owning it, it's under that kind of a structure. If it's us owning it as an independent power producer, most often those contracts are 20 years, 25 years in length, which marries to this kind of project life that we're talking about and when we model for tax revenue and as we present those numbers. So we're in a contract to be getting revenue for a project for the next 20 years. We're not gonna stop getting that revenue. And in the event that, you know, the national grid renewables as a whole went obsolete, the inherent value with a generation interconnection agreement to the grid, someone required to buy the power from that plant. It's not just, you know, us, there's investors, there's tax equity, there's other financing partners that are in there that come up and step in. So there is a lot of other scenarios that would come into play before the project just before it's just a solar field and no one's taking care of it. So many other scenarios would come into play before a county would ever actually have to draw on decommissioning funds for a project. This is ultimately what I'm trying to say. And then to further with Eric's point about the Public Service Commission involvement, is that decommissioning plan is held to regardless of who that owner or operator is, and regardless of if they are decommissioning the plan because it's the end of its useful life, or if they're deciding to because it's no longer economically viable.
So is the eventual owner National Grid or whoever eventually buys it and takes it over? Are they obligated to decommission it at the end? Or, I mean, can they turn around and say, well, we've given Polk County a bond for $15 million, go take it out Polk County?
No, well, from the perspective of their contractual obligation, they will, when they purchase this, assuming that that's the sale from National Grid to somebody else, decommissioning will be a complete obligation of the transaction itself. So you have the transactional obligation, which is contractual between those parties. You have the obligation that the commission has given to National Grid or to the ultimate purchaser to do the same. So there's multiple layers, as Kara said, to ensure that decommissioning will be done. And just one other point on that. Like any savvy commercial entity, right? National Grid does not want to leave open-ended issues on a transaction of this length, of this amount of money, and of this importance to the community, right? So there's not going to be a situation where there's sort of a gaping hole of this nature, like an open-ended question as to who's going to decommission when. Contractually, they're going to make sure that any purchaser of this project has that obligation contractually. Because they're concerned about the same things you are in that sense.
All right. So segueing to the fourth bullet point, it says Section 8 previously provided no obligation to notice parties or towns or county if the project was sold. Eric has proposed revision to that where we would notice unless the notice violates any confidentiality agreements, and that would just be, from time to time. In preliminary stages of project sale, we're not able to actually disclose that information to the public. And that just happened recently with two of my projects until the utility themselves is ready to do a press release. And then at that time, we're able to disclose that. But so we've added that provision in there. It's not something that we would keep from you unless we were legally obligated to share it at that exact moment in time. And similarly, an assignment of interest in our regard would happen, fairly within the development process and most likely prior to construction of the facility. So fifth bullet point here, what penalties, if any, for not adhering to the JDA? So the response here, Eric provided, and I'll just let you go over.
This is an enforceable agreement. So it's an enforceable agreement. You can go to court with it. You can go to court against National Grid and seek remedies that will be appropriate. And if a typical remedy in a legal proceeding is what's called damages, right? Money, cash. And if cash is not sufficient to give you the remedy that would make you whole, you can seek equitable damages, so actually action by the person that you're suing. Those two things combined should provide assurances that you can either get money to do what you need to do, or you can force National Grid, if it violates the JDA, to actually do what it committed to doing. So this agreement is enforceable in that regard. And one other comment, the equitable remedy, meaning the remedy where you can force somebody to do something, is much more commonly available in transactions involving land, right? Because land's a unique property. And so you can't sometimes have money substitute for the value of a specific piece of property. I mention that to suggest that equitable remedies are equally likely in a scenario like this, where you're trying to get, in the decommissioning context, the land back to the state that it was before the panels went on. An equitable remedy is a much more likely result. I think that should bring you some comfort, because courts see land as what it is, which is unique in that way.
Anything further on that particular point? Excellent. So the end bullet point on this page was just what is CPCN. We added to a little build out on that. So in order to build a project, Apple River Solar must apply for and receive a certificate of public convenience and necessity, CPCN, from the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin.
I'll give just a quick walkthrough on what this process is going to look like, so folks have a sense of what it is. And just as my background as well, I used to work at the commission. I was a commissioner on the commission in Wisconsin for about 7 or 8 years. So I saw a number of these projects, both old coal plants, natural gas plants, and now, of course, we're seeing renewable projects come through. Regardless of the kind of generation, the projects go through the commission in a relatively similar way on a similar pace. As you've seen, National Grid filed the application. Fairly complex application, a lot of engineering analysis, a lot of environmental analysis, and a lot of archaeological and related analysis about the land itself. We will have, as we heard earlier, an opportunity for parties to intervene. Polk County has intervened in this case, and so has Renew Wisconsin. Renew Wisconsin is the renewable advocate, or a renewable advocate in Wisconsin. From my experience, Renew will not be heavily involved in the case. They may throw in a comment or two on something they like, or a question about a condition that they think is important for the project, but they're not going to be a real heavily engaged party in the case. The county, as a party, has opportunity to do and engage in whatever way it sees fit in this proceeding. There's also a related obligation as a party. The opportunity I'll talk about first, it's really to ask, as we're doing here in a casual way, but it's also the ability to ask questions formally, whether it's through counsel or without attorneys. You can do it without an attorney as well. To ask questions of us in that proceeding. Those questions will be answered, typically in the form of data requests, and those all go in front of the 3 commissioners of the Public Service Commission. That'll happen early on. There will then be an opportunity and an obligation on our part and an opportunity on the county's part to put in testimony in the case. And so it's actually like a trial. It's unfortunately not nearly as interesting as the trials you watch on TV. This is all done through what's called pre-filed testimony. So we will put together, through 3 or 4 witnesses, summaries that look kind of like affidavits, summaries of our positions on various key elements of the application. We will put that testimony in. You will then have an opportunity to put in testimony of your own, either in support of the project, against portions of the project, hopefully not, but that's certainly your opportunity as a party, or you don't have to put anything in at all. You can stand down on the testimonial part. This process I'm describing, the exchanging of data requests, the testimony, putting in testimony, there'll be multiple rounds of testimony so we can respond to what you put in. That'll take approximately 6 months. Doesn't sound like it should, but that's just the nature of the process. That'll be facilitated by an administrative law judge and commission staff. The 3 commissioners will not be involved at this point yet. Once all that testimony gets in, there will be a hearing. Typically, the hearing is held both here locally as well as in Madison. Because of COVID, I think it's going to be a remote hearing, all done through video conferencing. And at the hearing, you will have opportunity as a party, as will Renew as a party, to ask questions of our witnesses who've put in the testimony already, and it'll look something like a trial, except that it'll last only a couple of hours typically on one day. The public will have an opportunity in that process to put in their view. Because the public generally are not parties, it's not the same advocacy opportunity that you'll see. Excuse me, let me change. This is not working the way I hoped. The public will not have the opportunity to have data requests. They can't put in witness testimony, but they can put in their own view of what's happening. They can file that at any time in the docket. There will be a public hearing for them as well to put their views on the record. All that evidence, the public comments, the pre-filed testimony, the transcript from the hearing that's going to be held is all compiled and then presented to the 3 commissioners. The 3 commissioners will have that material, and then sometime between 6 months and a year from when we filed the application originally, the 3 commissioners will get in a room in Madison, or a virtual room in Madison right now, and they will debate this project, and they'll walk through all of the obligations that National Grid and Apple River have to make to see whether or not Apple River has met its burden. It's Apple River's burden to show that they're entitled to build this project. The 3 commissioners will vote, and then if there's at least 2 votes in support of that project, it'll be approved. And they will write up the order and will be done subject to people's rights to appeal the process. There's certainly a little more detail involved in that. There's going to be an environmental assessment that's done as well by commission staff. People have an opportunity to comment on that. But that's the general process. Typically, as I said, 9 to 12 months from start to finish. I'm happy to take any questions on what that process looks like otherwise. And everything is publicly available. As I suspect many of you know, all the documents are already online. All the hearings are public. It's completely transparent. When the commissioners make their decision, because they're subject to ex parte rules, they cannot talk to each other about the project until they come into a room like this and have a public discussion, sometimes a public debate about the details of the project. And just one of the point, they will make a determination on primary versus alternate sites.
So much more detailed there in explanation, but the overview and the highlights of what the CPCN is and who it is administered from has been inserted into the joint development agreement. The next piece, it was a bullet point on the utility payments, and I think it'd be good if we could pull up the slide, the PowerPoint with the last slide that has that visual breakdown of revenue. So revenue right now is addressed in section 4 of the JDA. So looking at that in conjunction with this table. So let's see, I'll hop over here. Okay, beautiful. So the utility aid formula is under these statutes, 7628 or 7629 annual license fee. And it is the Wisconsin Department of Administration that then distributes to the municipalities based on location. So basically this formula comes into play as soon as you have a project that's larger than 50 megawatts in size. The utility aid formula itself is broken down into an allocation portion and an incentive payment portion. So kind of how that here, we have our annual allocations, and then we have the incentive and the combination. So This, the allocation and incentive are a split. So 2,000 of the 4,000 is allocation, and the other 2,000 is incentive. The incentive is easier to talk about, so I'll go through that one first. So the incentive payment is just where it is, right? So if it's 100% in Polk County, then the county is getting $1,000 times the size of that project. So in this case, we are proposing a 100 megawatt project. So that is $100,000 annually. And then the remainder of the incentive payment is still $1,000 to the towns. And again, based upon the megawatt. So with our layout, assuming we're building on the primary portions that we've delineated, not the alternate. And again, as Eric mentioned, that's subject to commission approval. We have 16.4 megawatts proposed for the town of Clayton. 16.4 times 1,000 gives us $60,400 annually as the incentive payment. So on and so forth. That's an easy one. We have 35 megawatts for town of Lincoln, 35,000 a year. Apple River, 48.6 megawatts, $48,600 for that incentive payment portion. So basically, all of the towns' incentive payments add up to that $100,000. The county, because it's completely in the same county, it's just $100,000. And again, that's based upon that 100 megawatt size. If a project was 50 megawatts in size, it would be half of everything, right? Now, that allocation piece, that other 2,000 of the 4,000, because that utility aid formula is a total of $4,000 per megawatt, is further drilled in and based upon location. So this portion is you have one third going to towns and 2/3 going to the county. I believe a lot of times the reasoning behind this, for the most part, the majority of places in Wisconsin, the county has zoning authority. There are a few kind of one-offs with towns here and there, but for the most part, most of the places, the county has the majority of the zoning responsibilities. So 2/3 going to the county for that reasoning. So now we're taking 2/3 times $2,000, which ends up being $1,333.33, times it by 100, because that is the size of our project, and that is equivalent to 133. Oh gosh, that's just too much of a time. That makes three, but that's the breakdown there. Now with the towns, it's the same application. Now we're taking that 1/3. We're timesing it by the amount of megawatts that are shown in that town's jurisdictional boundaries. So for Clayton, the 16.4, that comes out to be a little under $11,000. For the town of Apple River, taking that 48.6 megawatts, that is equivalent to a little over $32,000. For Lincoln, 35 megawatts times the 1/3 value is just shy of $23,000. The reason Beaver is here and in the JDA being shown as 0, it's because Beaver is shown on our layout as our alternate. So we aren't off the bat ourselves proposing to put and place equipment in that area. And again, a number of factors, and we could have actually to the map, just back one here. So everything red is primary, the blue is the alternate. So here we have everything that's in blue is in the town of Beaver. So reasoning behind that, I hope it's kind of obvious when you look at it, but we have a larger water body we're dealing with. Right here, while it doesn't show very well on this map, is a larger block of trees. And so as we looked at our project in totality, some of those, as Eric mentioned, we do a number of cultural resource studies, environmental studies, wetlands, looking at wildlife and species. And then we put all of that together, look at what we're working with, and based on all the data we have, we say, okay, it is better and makes more sense that we have the project here because we have, as we propose, we believe that there's less impacts to building a project in that area. Whereas if we have the project over here, it certainly could work, from a logistics standpoint, that still works for solar. It's just preferred if it's in this area. So that's how we present it. But the commission, they want to have an Derek can actually probably get, if you want to get into why this requirement is in place, that would be good.
So what you see in blue is not approximately, it is 20, it provides additional 25%. So instead of having the ability to produce 100 megawatts, what you see here could produce 125 megawatts. But the project's only going to be 100 megawatts. The commission by law is required to look at alternatives. The way they've interpreted that for solar and for wind projects is to require in the context of these renewable projects is to provide an additional 25% to allow the commission, when it's approving the project, to say, well, you know, we have an issue in this case in the red area, in the primary, that we think is actually legitimate. We want to push some of that into the alternate area. So that allows the commission to do that when it approves the project. It also allows the commission, when it approves the project, to put in an order point, as it always does, that says the developer, in this case Apple River, if it has to tweak the project when it actually gets boots on the ground and starting to put in work, it can come back to the commission and ask for a slight movement to allow it to go into that 25% area. So it provides a little bit of construction flexibility when things on the ground aren't as you would normally see them when you're at this stage of the process. Just taking a step back in history, when you were doing coal plants and natural gas plants, the developer or the utility had to propose an entire different site. So if you're building a 500 megawatt coal plant, you had to propose two coal plant sites, and the commission would pick and choose which one it thinks is appropriate. For transmission lines, it's a variation on this, where they make one transmission line going from A to B, and they make another transmission line going from A to B, and the commission picks which one it thinks is best. So it's the same concept, just plays out differently depending upon the kind of project you have. But that area in blue is going through the exact same process as the area in red. I mean, it's gone through all of the environmental evaluations, it's gone through all the engineering evaluations, so it can be built.
So what assurances does the town of Beaver have? Because right now they're showing us $0. But if you get pushed into that alternate site somewhere, what in the contract anywhere is going to make sure that Beaver gets paid their X amount of dollars? You know, because it isn't showing up anywhere now in the joint development agreement. It's saying Beaver gets 0. So if you have to go over and use 30, 40 acres of Beaver in the town of Beaver, what's their assurance in the JDA that they're going to actually get paid?
The JDA has a placeholder on this very issue because, as you just said, it's not entirely sure how the panels are going to ultimately be aligned. The JDA has a placeholder on it that says this is what we believe the payments are going to be based upon how we filed the case. The payments are actually required by state statute. So although we're agreeing to conceptually these payments in the JDA, ultimately what's going to happen is going to be a formula that's done by state statute. So there's no way to say, put panels in there in Beaver and say, you're not getting this money. They're going to get the money either way. And DOA, the Department of Administration, does that math as well.
Chairman Olson? I believe the town of Beaver might be on the line right now, and they might have some additional questions. Do you want me to patch them through?
Yeah, go ahead.
Anyone from the town of Beaver out there that wants to make a comment or ask questions? Figured I'd check.
That,
Anybody from the towns, if you have a question, feel free to chime in at any time.
does that help answer the original question that was posed on the utility payments and how they're determined and how they're distributed? All right, so the next question running down the bullet list was one on decommissioning, which we discussed more at length at the beginning. So I'm going to go to the next one, which is history of business model, any past projects, failures at this scale, success stories. So provided a handful of bullet points here on, just some of our recent developments and project portfolio. And then I will add the next bullet point was also National Grid Renewables experience and success stories, failures of other projects. So just kind of combining both of those two bullet points in one. So as an overall, I guess speaking to our experience, National Grid Renewables, formerly known as Geronimo Energy, has been around close to 2 decades. We started as a wind developer, and we were founded by farmer Noel Ron. And I believe for some of you, I've already told the story too, but as there may be new members in the audience that haven't heard, I'll just dive into it a little. Noel was approached by a developer to participate in a wind project and did not feel like he was being treated fairly. And he said, you know what, I can do this. And he did. And he ended up putting up turbines on him and his brother's land. And in short, that was the genesis of Geronimo Energy. When we started, it was as sophisticated as they were driving around drawing transmission lines on napkins. It has grossly changed since then in the industry as a whole. But that was where we started and where we were born. Fast forward, and back in when I started with the company, which was back in 2015, we were pretty well into also solar development as well. It was probably back in 2012, 2013 that we were really starting to add solar development into the mix and not just wind. Then go in about 2017, we added an operational arm of our company. So we were no longer just develop and sell. So whether that be develop and sell to utility or develop and sell to another independent owner and operator, our goal is to own and operate as many projects as we can that we are developing. Add and go from there. In 2019 of July was when we were acquired by National Grid. And we are owned by National Grid Ventures, which is their unregulated arm. We have over 2,400 megawatts of operational wind or solar projects that we have either developed and sold, or we are owning and operating ourselves. We have an extensive pipeline with close to 8,000 or more megawatts in it. Apple River would be a project that is in that pipeline. We no longer just work in the Midwest with the National Grid ownership. That has allowed us to expand more broadly across the country and work deeper into the East Coast and the West Coast and the South. We're working in Texas. We have so many projects that I can't even keep track of anymore like I used to be able to with our different market leads. I work in what's called our Region 6, which is Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. And I got my hands full with just working enough in Wisconsin and a little bit in Michigan myself. So to further into that, solar and wind developments, they're very complex, and it really isn't a one-size-fits all. So when we talk or are poised to question for any past projects, failures at the scale, so I guess utilities, this would be considered a utility scale project. Utility scale projects range in size from 50 megawatts on the small end to upwards of, you could have a 500 megawatt solar project, 600, 800, even 1,000 if you're in some places where there's enough, contiguous land to have a project that big. And with that, no one size fits all. There's various stages of projects. So it isn't uncommon for a project earlier on in development to effectively fail, and that could be due to lack of landowner interest. I could go into an area and say, this looks like a great spot for interconnection. There's permissive zoning here. I have a couple landowners that are interested in doing it, but as soon as I start outreach with the broader landowner base, if I can't obtain enough land for a utility scale project, then that project is effectively dead right there, then and there. As you continue through the development process, you continue to de-risk the project. You get more information on the project. There are some things that are out of our control, such as the interconnection piece, for example. We have electrical engineers. We look at things, we model, we make our, best educated decisions on a specific injection point for being suitable. And with that being said, in theory, you could connect anywhere. It just depends on how much you're willing to pay. At the time, a project may have, based on our model, looked favorable for interconnection, but we get further on down the line, we figure out more details on land costs, taxes change, this or that, and suddenly that interconnection cost may no longer work for the project. And the price per megawatt hour that you're able to offer, either to a utility or to a larger corporation, if it's a virtual power purchase agreement, may not be competitive with the market. Something like that could kill a project. So there's a number of things that could cause projects to drop off here and there. And it's not uncommon for some projects to never make it past that original land stage. To have a project at this particular stage where we have interconnection enrolling, we have all the land we need, we've gone through all of our studies, we've done some extensive preliminary engineering, and we're at this stage of community engagement and outreach. It's very rare for a project at this stage to outright fail. Not to say that couldn't happen in some world, and it may not take off, but ultimately at this stage of an investment, it is pretty solid. Now that being said, we would need someone for this project to be the commercial offtake for it. That's something we're still working and actively marketing. And as we continue to get further along with some of those big risk items, which are, do you have a permit to operate the project? We're in process and working to obtain that. That is something that is a lot more attractive to commercial offtake. The further along in the interconnection process you are, the more detailed you are able to drill in on those costs, and the more accurately you're able to model what your expenses would be related to it. That also makes the project more attractive to commercial offtake. So we're still early enough, but still have made it a good deal with this project. That being said, we're still actively marketing this one for commercial offtake. Does that help give a little bit more insight into the development kind of process? And overall, like I said, it's really not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to projects whatsoever. That would make my job way too easy. All right, hearing silence, I will proceed onward. So we touched on the second bullet point on this page is can the sureties be paid earlier than year 6? We propose to accelerate the schedule earlier than year 6 in the revision in section 6. A, where instead of it being at your help me out here, Eric.
Yeah, it was 10% at 10% at year 1. Now it's 20%.
And
then on the 4th year, we're going to 50% instead of the 6 years.
then the 8th
And the 8th year as opposed to the 11th for complete funding.
And then breakage and disposal plan. So again, if panels break, they will be taken to the recycling facility. Yes.
If they break on the Apple River project, where will the panels be taken?
That will have to be determined when the project is actually up and running, what's around, what's the nearest.
There's specific requirements to be able to, for a facility to be able to recycle those types of panels.
For a facility.
You can't take them to the Polk County Recycling Center, I don't think.
No, I mean, and I don't know that. And that's honestly not my job to know that. That would be our operations team members, or the utility that would own and operate that. But that is it. That's one of those things similar to an overall safety and operations plan. Like those things come in place closer to that time. It's a little premature to outline things like that when we're not at a point where we're starting construction. We haven't procured the equipment. We're not going out there. So we'll will that be outlined and will that be known? But it's not at this time.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question that's kind of a little off topic, but you probably answered it before and I just don't remember. Will there be a well drilled out there so you have access to water?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't think you have asked me that or that I have answered that before. So we hop back to the layout.
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me see here.
All right, so right over here in this corner of the project is where we are proposing to have a small operations and maintenance building area. Usually, projects operations and maintenance building is in close proximity to the project substation, which is proposed to be across the street from the existing Apple River substation. So usually, I do have a few projects where we actually are in close proximity to sewer, where we have the potential to hook up into that for sewer and water. But most likely there would be a well for water in that area. In the event that the operation and maintenance building actually gets built, I say that because at the time of a project going to construction and actually being built, and depending on who is the owner and operator, if there is a viable office space in a city that's only, a couple miles out, I often see kind of that switch at this project size where it just makes sense for them to rent an office somewhere that's, 5 minutes away from the project kind of a thing. And they can use that as their home base and, drive to and from it as they're on site throughout the day.
So do the panels themselves need to be cleaned?
Nope. Oh, not in the Midwest. So we get enough precipitation here that that's not an issue. Unlike this is like the desert where the dust is blowing around everywhere, and it actually interferes with production. So it's not. We get enough rain and we get enough snow and enough sleet and stuff falling from the sky.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. All right. Let's see. Got a little sidetracked here. So next bullet point on the list was for all roads / driveways should require town approval, not optional. Our response there, our intent wasn't to make it optional. Rather, it would depend on the zoning authority for each driveway, as there are multiple proposed access points. So we've revised the language in section 1.f to make that clearer. So it's not that we weren't going to not get driveway permits. The way, depending on the final location of driveways, could depend on who has the jurisdiction for that driveway in the siting. So hopefully that helps clear that piece up. Next, roads need to be a minimum of 20 feet wide. So we have the project currently designed at 16 feet. And this is adequate for emergency and site access, and we've drilled into this quite a bit with a lot of our operational projects. Even 12 to 14 feet would be accessible. Within the project, there are multiple hammerhead locations where vehicles would be able to turn around and exit if they needed to, rather than making a full U-turn on the road itself. And this is sufficient for our work trucks and deliveries, for some of the larger trucks that will be coming onto the site to deliver the panels, the racking, and those types of equipment. To further add some bullet points for fire and emergency responders, we don't expect that, and I believe I mentioned this at the last meeting, and this is again something that's hit on and explained in a project safety and operations plan, and there is significant correspondence with emergency responders prior to the construction of the facility, and the facility is also being constructed to give that comfort as well as provide that education and resources for what to do in the event of emergency. But in short, we don't expect that firefighters would be in there fighting fires themselves. So the ask and what is proposed for solar projects really across the Midwest is that perimeter control. So, you're not going to fight, if there was an electrical issue, you're not going to be dousing panels with water. It's grass. So looking to maintain that perimeter around that, so we wouldn't have fire trucks within the facility itself. Any emergency responders, if there was a medical emergency on site, this would again be in that emergency response plan, which is put together prior to a project actually going into construction, because you have all of your location points, everything detailed and zoomed in. And we would have them meet us at a gate, and they would be led to the emergency. They wouldn't be expected to try to have the site map and the layout memorized and know what it means if there was someone having, a heart attack at array block 18 or something. Like, we wouldn't expect them to know what to do to get in there. They would be let in. So furthering to why 16 feet is adequate, an increase from 16 to 20 feet is very substantial and would cause a large increase in the gravel surface area. Through the engineer's calculation, it would close to almost double what is being proposed right now for the project, which is otherwise really low, which would result in having to have an increase for stormwater controls to the site and just more soil disturbance and less of that stable ground cover area for the life of the project. So one of the good things about these projects is there's very little to no concrete associated with them. The posts are pile driven in. There is not concrete associated with those parts. The inverters themselves are most often on precast skids that have little footings that are plopped down. And then you have your access roads. Access roads definitely in the right of way are gravel, because that is most of the requirements for road jurisdictions with the driveway entrance. However, if we have a site that has suitable soils that isn't getting too wet or too mucky, we're going to look to try to utilize just a traditional farm access in parts of the project where we can. Not only does that minimize cost from gravel, but it also minimizes those impervious surface and just the allows for easier reclamation at the time of decommissioning the project. So that, and then lastly, the increase in road size would add a large delivery increase to the site.
Question on access then.
Yeah.
Although your access roads are 16 feet, your access point will vary depending on the access policy for the owner of the highway.
Correct, absolutely. Yep, so I'd say most common, our driveway entrances are about 30 feet. Just not spitballing on average, of course, everything done within the right of way will be done to the requirements of whoever has the zoning authority for issuance of the driveway permit. But then once you get in the site, it's essentially, we call them access roads, but they're a lot like a driveway to a home in that sense, where we're utilizing that space to be able to access and service the equipment as needed.
How far are the posts driven in the ground?
It depends on the soil. On average, about 12 feet is the depth. So next bullet point was 3B strike, need to negotiate. Towns might not have the capacity to fix. So this was one we weren't 100% sure what was being referred to, but we proposed to strike out of section 2 language that we believe gave the county concerns.
Yes, so this was language, I think the concern was probably, we framed it as we will work jointly to address any road concerns, and I get the sense from the comment that there was concern there's not authority necessarily on your side to do some of the work that we agreed to do jointly. So we struck the language out. We're happy if there's something else that you prefer that we put in, we're happy to consider that and do it. It was just respond to the concern you raised, Bill, I think is your ability to do certain road work.
Is that adequate? Is anyone able to expand on that? Or we, as we proposed, just to strike that to help the situation? The way the question was phrased. So I know I'm asking everyone to remember something from January 8th, so I do apologize. But
Basically, you'll be responsible for any road damage during construction on that.
Correct.
Not having the town public work.
Okay, good. Same page. Second bullet point on this list is, can we see a template of a landowner lease agreement? And the answer to that is no, we cannot. Our leases are confidential agreements with our landowners. We do not mass distribute them. The third bullet point, Apple River Solar shall instead of will develop a ECP. We revised in section 3 that we shall develop an erosion control plan, stormwater management plan for the project. Setbacks from the property line instead of buildings is our fourth bullet point on this list. So what we are following, and I am not the permitting specialist for this project, Jenny, who is, probably has all of these numbers exactly memorized, but we look to the local guidelines for rules and requirements for what are the front yard, what is the rear yard, what is the side yard, what are the setbacks from the right of way, and that is what we utilize for the project. Above and beyond that, we then have enforced on ourselves a 100-foot setback from structures. So this is, again, this is just this is a part of any ordinance requirements. This is just our company standard and what we've been doing with our projects as we go through the Public Service Commission. So this is something that's voluntary. It is something that's conservative, and we're keeping it with that 100-foot setback from the buildings themselves, not the property lines. That being said, even if we are 100 foot from a building, if the side yard or rear yard or whatever is 50 feet, we're following that from the line itself. That other setback is just our voluntary setback we put on ourselves, not any county requirements. Fifth bullet point down, minimum of 8-foot fencing for Public Service Commission high recommendation. Eric, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, so the 8 feet is what you're going to see. This is developed over the course of the 5 or so CPCNs I mentioned already that have been approved for solar projects. There were actually some vigorous debates early on with some of the applicants about what the right size for the height is. The commission made clear that it wants as a general standard 8 feet, which I think they feel is protective enough. They've also decided it should be deer fencing as an additional sort of protection, I'll call that. The exceptions are going to be for the substation, where you're going to have some variation on razor wire, which is a requirement of national code for a system of that danger, frankly. The solar panels don't have anything like that kind of danger, but the substation obviously does. So you're going to see razor wire around that. The ask, I believe, was can you go at least 8 feet or higher? And I do believe, based upon looking at this project, that it's going to be 8 feet across the board, as built. But there's a possibility that the commission could order, in a particular situation or a particular part of the project, something less than 6 feet. That could be for an aesthetic reason. There could be other reasons that we haven't contemplated yet. And so we want to leave that option. And the practical effect as well is that we can't contract around the commission's authority. So the commission has broad authority to set the fence height the way it wants. We could say it has to be a minimum of 8 feet. If the commission says we wanted 6 feet in this particular location, that's going to drive the train anyway, because the commission has the authority to set the fence height. I do think it's going to be 8 feet across the board. I've not seen an exception, a project-specific exception yet. I've not looked at every single project in depth on this issue, but they've ordered 8 feet, and I understand they're all going to be built at 8 feet.
So with that being said, we left section 71 on the fence height unchanged. Moving down the list, concerns over deer crossing and Highway 8. So staying in that section 72, we have identified and outlined, basically, and as Eric mentioned, the Department of Natural Resources is very involved in the Public Service Commission process for these types of projects. And what we've left here is the ability to modify the layout as potentially required by the DNR as we go through this process. So they're looking at all of our reports, they're looking at wildlife in the area, they're looking at our layout. They are heavily involved in this process, and if they're going to have us alter or change things, and fence height could be one of those for a particular species, that is the reason there may be that variation. That part will get addressed as we work with them through the CPCN.
Yeah, and this specific issue has come up in a recent case, and I believe the commission ordered the applicant to work with DNR on wildlife crossings. So what's happened, as I said, there's been 5 already. It's been a learning process. So in many ways, I think what you're seeing in front of you and what you'll see if the commission approves it is a more nuanced, a more refined approval than what we saw on the very first project. I was the attorney on the very first project in Wisconsin, which was only about 2 years ago. And so that was actually a little more contentious than what you're seeing now, in part because there were some things that the commission had not yet resolved and was taken up as a first of its kind. Some of those things have played out now, so I think what you're seeing now is a little smoother path on these because there's less resistance from our side because we know where the commission is, and there's less push from the other side because people understand that these issues are being addressed. On the wildlife crossing, DNR will look at that, and I suspect will very likely put in testimony in this case that will probably ask for some sort of cooperation between DNR and Apple River on this issue. And of course, we will agree to that.
Can we go back to the map, this map again a second?
Take me there. This one, the other one? No, the other
Yeah,
one.
that one there. So Tracy, I'll ask you, is that a road that splits all 4 of the townships there? Because it doesn't show it on my map.
That's double J.
Yeah.
That's double J that goes into range
And D is the splitting road going to the
Okay.
east.
between the two.
Okay. So, of course, I'm the one that's concerned about the deer crossing, but you've created a pinch point for deer to have to go down and cross double J to get to a spot where they can only cross into maybe a 15 or 20 acre area and be forced to come back again. And that's got to be a very tight pinch point there. So it's going to be a matter of well under a quarter mile that you're going to force all the deer that go into that swampy wooded area. If they want to cross double J, that's the only spot they can cross. And once they get across, their only choice is to come back again, because there's nowhere else for them to go other than in that 20 acre spot or however big that area is. And that creates, to me, a horrible traffic hazard. You're going to make deer go back and forth in that one little spot. And probably as bad as that is that if they don't hit that spot where they cross, they're now forced into a big stretch where they can't get off of the road, period. So they're going to have to go a quarter mile or however far it is before they can actually get off the road. And so I see that for traffic. I see that as a horrible hazard of giving that wildlife, deer mainly, no other option of having to cross back over the road or run way down the road to get off of it. To me, that just, when I seen this map, the first thing that jumped out at me was that's a horrible traffic danger as far as people hitting deer.
Yeah, so I think you've raised legitimate concern. We'll go back and look at this later. I do know these issues, as I said, are much more at the forefront of DNR's mind now than they were 2 years ago.
And I got no faith in the DNR. So.
I'm taking. We'll look at it.
So as long as we're on it, it's not really related, but it's related to deer. So you go out and fence that area in 200, 300, 400 acres, whatever it is. and you put that 8-foot fence up, and my understanding is you don't want white-tailed deer in there because they're going to be an issue to the panels. What happens to the deer that are in there?
I mean, it's not that they would be an issue to the panels. What I usually find is the state agency's preference is just that, we don't suddenly become deer farmers. So, they can get in and they can leave. And with a lot of our projects that are operational, and a lot of our ones in Minnesota are operational, don't have deer fencing. They have the barbed wire fencing. The deer still find their way in and they get in and out. And it hasn't been an issue. There are similarly to we have setbacks from the right of way. The majority of the time when I'm driving, I see deer in the right of way, or on some next field edges outside of forest and things like that. I know they certainly can go wherever they normally please, but again, it hasn't been a concern for any of our operational projects. Whether they get in, they eventually get out. We haven't had.
You put that 8-foot fence up, they're not getting out. It's as simple as that.
They can in, they can get out. Deer can jump higher than 8 feet if they really want to.
No, they can't get out of my brother's 8-foot fence around his blueberries once they get in, until they
Well, we
get
won't put
by his
blueberries
house. I mean, I guess I'm just looking for the answer of what happens to them once that deer gets locked in there, because there's going to be deer in there once that fence is finished. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Are they just going to be shot? Okay.
One of Traverse Falls.
So is the fence for the wildlife or is it for humans?
The fence is also a national electric code requirement. It's a power plant, so it has to be fenced. Different, as Eric was elaborating with the substation, there's different fencing requirements for, that aspect of the power plant versus the remainder of the site itself. But yes, we just don't want anyone walking up and into the facility that doesn't have proper credentials or authority to be, in a power plant. So the last bullet point question was to, go into explain the hazardous materials disposal risks associated with the panels, and that was the piece that I had wanted to emphasize and touch on, was that our plan in place is to reduce, reuse, recycle, and use those options and not have the panels themselves go to a landfill. However, the JA Solar 450-watt panels, which are what we have proposed and the detailed engineering is done on, they do not exceed EPA thresholds such that they wouldn't be able to go to a landfill if that was the only option for the panels themselves. With conclusion of going through those questions, are there additional other questions? We want to pull back up the layout, if that would be helpful just to have that up, or actually, one thing I do want to touch on, and Bob segued into it, the portion of the joint development agreement that changed is section 5, the community fund. So the version that is in the packet and that you may have, alludes to that, we'll be working with both of the school districts to delineate how that revenue would be distributed. So with National Grid Renewables, all of our projects, it's our standard that we implement a community fund or education fund, and they're used interchangeably. And that is $200 per megawatt and a 20-year commitment. And again, that 20-year commitment ties to useful project life and what we see for usually minimum operation projects. So, with that, a 100 megawatt project would be, $400,000 in the course of the year, if I'm doing math right. on the spot. No, over the lifetime of the project. I'm not doing math right on the spot. $40,000 a year. Thank you. Wow, that would be. So anyways, through consultation with Amory and Clayton, they have agreed to distribute it based on enrollment. The numbers that were used were their recent enrollment numbers from January 8th, 2021. What they said is really historically those numbers don't change all that much. So we did do just a little bit of rounding to keep things nice and clean and even. So 80% will go to Amory and 20% will go to Clayton on an annual basis. That is something that is looks a little bit different in the joint development agreement version that I sent off to Bob and Tim on.
So is the expected cost of decommissioning, is that considered in the overall cost of the project at the start also?
From a commercial perspective, certainly, right? So it's a cost of doing business that every company builds into its model, its long-range model. Obviously, companies think about how they finance a commitment that far out differently than they would if they had to finance it 2 years from now. But in this case, we're also putting up a bond as we've committed to in the JDA. But absolutely, yeah, it's a cost of doing business. And because this is a heavily regulated business, that's why we're all here, because it has to go through the Public Service Commission. Those numbers are inked pretty well. So, and they're thought out not only by the developer, but also by the commission when it looks at the wherewithal of the company taking ownership.
So why Polk County? Why Wisconsin? When, if you look it up, Wisconsin and Minnesota are far and away the two worst spots to build a solar powered plant in the nation, as far as sunshine, return on expense. You know, you look at the winter we have. Well, I love it when it's cloudy in the wintertime because that means it's warm. I can't think you're going to generate a lot of power in what we've had the last couple months. You know, you said you don't have to wash them here, but we might get some wet, heavy, sticky snow that sticks on them for, 4 days at a time. So why Polk County, why Wisconsin, when realistically we are one of the two worst states in the nation to generate solar power in?
Can I take a high level at it? It won't be from a legal perspective. I'll let Kara certainly talk about the company. This comes more from my prior job as chairman of the commission. And this body, the Public Service Commission, is a public policy making body, just like you are making policy here for the county. They are making policy in a relatively narrow area for the state. And going back, in fact, Wisconsin is one of the first states to actually regulate utilities. It's ground setting in many ways, starting with the Railroad Commission in Wisconsin that morphed into the Public Service Commission. But going all the way back 100 years, there's never been a time where there's not been a need to have native generation, that is, meaning generation close to load, close to where it's being used. And there's electrical reasons for that, right? The system works better if you can have electricity close to where it's being used. Wisconsin has satisfied that need historically through vertically integrated utilities. There's 5 in the state, 5 major ones, by building large coal plants, and then at some level transitioning to natural gas plants. We see both of those still in play now, although as Kara noted, Wisconsin Power Light and MG&E just announced the retirement of Columbia Power Plant, the largest remaining coal power plant in the state, with some other large ones still remaining in the southeastern part of the state. It's a transition. And so what Wisconsin utilities look at and what developers who serve them look at is how do you replace that generation that's currently serving Wisconsin? And while you can argue, and people will argue, I think, forcefully about whether a coal plant that still has book value on it, meaning it still hasn't been paid off, that coal plant, whether we should be retiring that coal plant, the reality is the economics of running that coal plant is more expensive than the economics of running this solar. Even though, as you noted appropriately, it's a cloudy state with not as much sun as Arizona. That's because the economics of solar have flipped. They have flipped dramatically in the last 2 years. Panels are getting much, much cheaper, and when you get cheaper panels, even if the technology's not gotten a whole lot better, the panels have gotten cheaper. And that has flipped the switch on the economics, and it's why you're seeing coal plants shut down, and it's why you're seeing solar built here. We could build solar that would have a higher capacity rate and get more energy in Arizona, no doubt about it. But then you got to get the energy here. So then you got to build big transmission lines to get it here. There's other ways to help address that. People are putting solar on their house, but there still is going to be, from my perspective, this is not lawyer Eric, it's former Commissioner Eric, there's going to be a need to have large energy producing projects close to load. That's why you're seeing so much solar in Wisconsin, despite the many cloudy days we have here. It still is economic. Now, Kara can talk about the company specifically, why the company's in Wisconsin.
Sure. Well, Eric did such a good job explaining it, but the reasoning behind why we're here is because of that. Because there has been recent calls for retirements, and the most recent one being just yesterday of the Columbia plant. So there is a need for replacement and review of utilities, renewable portfolio standards, or their resource plans when they chart out, hey, this is what we're looking to procure and replace these fleets that we're retiring, those integrated resource plans. They file with the Public Service Commission, and the commission approves. That helps drive the markets that we go into and where there's opportunities for solar development. So there's a market for solar here. That is what utilities are looking to procure here. We are headquartered out of the Midwest. It's a no-brainer why we're here and developing projects. And I am being tasked with site origination for new projects in the state, because we continue to see Wisconsin as a viable market forward from our projects that we have going now. Ones with potential 2024 or 2025 commercial operation dates onward. So that is why we're here.
And yet this power is going to go on the national grid at the end of the day. So it isn't like it's going to power the lights in this building necessarily. It could be powering something in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Chicago, Illinois, once it hits that national power grid.
At some level, that's the irony and the beauty of electricity, right? I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak about it from an engineering perspective. I always think about it in my mind as we put all the electricity at the top of a hill and it just goes where it's supposed to go. So what's going to actually happen is, if these solar panels get built locally, that electricity will be fed into the grid here. And if your concern is, are you going to be able to use these electrons? You will be, because typically the electrons go as far as they have to go to the load and are used here. So you will be using it locally. The economics are different, right? You're going to be paying your energy provider. I don't know if it's Dairyland or somebody else who's your electricity provider here. You're going to be paying them, and they may not be getting their electricity from this facility. So the economics aren't going to be the same, but you're going to be using these electrons, right? It just levels out across the whole country. I know the only way you can address that really is to put panels on your house. And that is a solution for some people. It still is a more expensive solution generally than renewable projects of this size. But that is also why the system works, right? That it levelizes in a way that makes all the engineering work out. But you are correct. It's not one-to-one. You aren't paying for the electron that's coming off of the solar facility.
You know, if there's plans to, like these panels that you use, they're all made in China. Are there plans to start building solar panels here or not, because they can't build them here cheap enough, or?
So First Solar is a panel producer that we've worked with on a handful of our projects that are operational. They have a plant in Ohio. They also have plants internationally as well. I honestly can't speak to the business decisions of where some manufacturers choose to locate.
If you say, where are those solar panels made, the JUA, whatever it is?
I would have to go look at
China.
this back.
Shanghai. It tells you.
It's a global market. It just says the majority of our economy is too. So even if they're manufactured there, not necessarily all of the pieces come from there. We're a globalized society now, and we procure our panels all over. Some of it depends on what's available at the time. Some of it is tied to the tier rating as well. There is tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 panels. For our investors, we need to be putting in tier 1 panels into our projects where we have that guarantee, we have that warranty. They're going to be producing power for the time that we're going to be there. Because about one of the worst things we could do is spend all that money on panels and have them bunk out in 5 years. That would, produce a situation where the plant isn't operating. So that also further limits, potential suppliers for our, engineering and procuring team when they're going to the market and looking at it. And, this is something very similar to we're proposing, those ones, because they are seemingly commercially available and seem to be commercially available when we
It lists online that they have a 10-year warranty, but they have an approximate lifespan of potentially 25 years. But the warranty itself, it says, is 10 years for those panels.
And what I can say is what they might have on their publicly available website versus what my engineering and procurement team deals with could be very different things.
Go ahead, Tim.
I got a chat from the town of Beaver who's online, who said they have a question, so if you don't mind, I'll unmute them.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, town of Beaver. If you still have your question. No.
Tim, if nothing else, if you could send them a message back and maybe they could type it to you.
Sure. Yep.
If we don't have them. Okay.
I've got a little answer for you guys. I work for a power company here that furnished power here for 47 years. And our biggest issue through the years with generating power, we had to generate our own in peak loads and stuff. Our company specifically was having an issue getting power to us in the state of Wisconsin up here. Because you've got the lakes on the west side, the transmission lines coming up had to come from the south or the west or north. And the more solar panels or the more power we can get up into our country is going to help with your paying your light bills at the end of the month. Because our wheeling power, I know at many times we had to buy power from California to come up to here, wheel through the transmission lines, and that gets really expensive. Back in a few years ago, when the grid was really bad, they have updated with their transmission lines now throughout the big companies, but our little company, we're kind of stuck up here because we don't have any more generation for water power, but we still have generators with diesel engines that we have to use in emergency. But what they're talking about, they're putting more power up here that's going to relieve XL or Polk or Northwestern like us. It should help maybe a little bit of the wheeling power coming up here. There'll be less payment. That helps you on your bills. I don't know what it'll change, but that's the issue is what costs you guys that are paying your light bills so much money. A lot of it is the wheeling power to get the power to our area because we don't have any big generation anywhere around. We have to get it. Northwestern's had to buy power from wind generators up in northern Minnesota about 10 years ago because the Public Service Commission required that. So we could buy power from them, from here probably. I don't know from your company. I don't know how that works, but But I know we have to do that. The companies, whatever your load is, has to buy power that's not used by coal or gas or anything. So the Public Service Commission requires that. So I think if everything goes the way they say it'll go, it should be a good deal for the power companies up here. I don't know how much it'll save, I can't tell you that, but through the system that I've worked all my life on, I know that it's coming and we don't have any choice with it. Wind generators and solar panels are going to be, it's coming no matter what. So they want to start here. I don't see an issue with it. I don't live in your townships. Just something that I've learned through the years. Thank you.
I think they're back online.
Okay?
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I did it right, thank God. So actually I got a couple of questions. So when you got, or this is Sabrina with the Town of Beaver, sorry. If you guys do end up having to go into our town, would you guys be needing to create a new joint development agreement or a revised one?
So it depends on how we execute this agreement right now. Right now, this agreement is structured as a JDA with all of the participating municipal governments, including the town of Beaver. Even though Beaver itself is not at this point anticipated to have panels there, if we can get execution on the JDA from everybody, that's outside of this body's scope of authority, but we wouldn't need another one. If we ended up doing JDAs piecemeal, then we would try and get a separate JDA with the town of Beaver.
Okay. And then my other,
Just a second, Sabrina.
Yep.
Maybe I'll dumb it down for you a little bit because this was asked earlier. You will get paid if they get into Beaver. You will get paid.
I'm sorry, correct, yes. If the question is, do you need a JDA to get paid, the answer is no. If the project is in the town of Beaver, you're going to get paid whether or not you have a JDA.
Go ahead, Sabrina.
okay. And then, so if you guys do go into ours, we already have that existing town road there. Would it be the town's responsibility to maintain it while you guys are there, or would we discontinue the road and then it goes over to Apple River Solar?
Yeah, Sabrina, and this is jogging my memory from when we had our one-on-one presentation with the board on, there is a particular road that services essentially the properties, only services the properties that could potentially compromise Apple River Solar. And I believe we talked about it, if that was the case, the town of Beaver would be interested in potentially abandoning that road and letting us, it basically just be a bigger driveway to our project. And again, forgive me because I'm not the permitting expert, but Sabrina, does the town issue driveway permits for town operated or town roads?
Yes, we do issue driveway permits.
Okay, so then you maintain them. So then the process, we would be able to work with you on the abandonment of that road in the event that that were to occur. Or would that still need to go through the county? It wouldn't, okay.
Vacation, the road. So you work with the town.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess this is, and maybe this is a bigger, broader question too, as, you know, Bob, as you've talked with the other towns as well. Is there interest in all of the towns signing the same JDA from the county? Is there interest in having deviations? You know, something that I could see happening and we're kind of doing with another project is we have, the county JDA, and with the town, where, that is, everything that's in the JDA that we've signed with the county is this exhibit, addendum, what have you. We're still agreeing to those requirements, but then there's a couple, like 2 or 3 add-ons that are specific to that town. So that's something that we could do with you, Sabrina, and the town of Beaver. If that would be of interest to specifically address this road, separate from this whole agreement, but again, just looking, and perhaps Bobby can comment, is there the preference that the JDA be specific just to the county right now, and we omit the towns from signing this particular piece? Has that been discussed in your coordination with the towns?
I don't know if I can answer that. I was under the impression that you would do the outreach with the towns to get their approval.
Sure. I mean, we have been, again, we've made introductions, we've presented it with it. I think a lot of the towns were looking to what the county was doing, and I know you had invited them to the meeting, and Bill's here, so I know we have some representation. But ultimately we can take it and we can strike it such that it's only, what you're seeing today would only be for Polk County, and then we can certainly work on deviations with the towns, or work towards to having that one singular document. But
we talked about that. I mean, granted, yes, the county has assumed a leadership role in eliciting these concerns, sharing them with you, having these conversations. But I don't know. Do we want to lead that effort in collecting signatures, or are we simply just focused on the county?
But you said you could, let's take the town of Beaver, for example, you end up there. You could take the one that, the county one, or the one that everybody signed, and you could still amend that for that simple fact to say, to the town of Beaver, we're going to take over this road.
yeah.
So, I mean, it could be amended
Yep.
town specific from
this,
from this.
Right.
Tim, you had a question, or you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering, since this joint development agreement is written where all the parties are on there and would be signatories of it, what happens if a town decides that they don't want to sign it right now and when it's built this way?
Yeah, so that would have no effect on our obligation to the other signatories of the JDA, and respectfully on your obligation to Apple River. It would still be an effective document, whether or not it was signed by everybody, just be between the parties who executed.
So if a party didn't sign it, I guess outside of Beaver today, because they're getting $0, if one of the municipalities or government entities did not sign, would they still get their share?
As I was thinking, I said that the one issue, and I'll defer to you on this, is school fund. I mean, the school fund's a commitment either way, right? So I guess that's a commitment to the schools. Just thinking out loud. Yeah, I think that was the only caveat in my mind, was to make sure the school funds are still addressed. I think they are. The monies that go to the municipal governments, again, are driven by statute, so they're going to get their money either way. I mean, what the JDA is in concept is to try and capture some of the statutory obligations that we have in terms of payments, and that we have in terms of coordinating construction activities by local ordinance or by statute, and putting them all in effectively one convenient place. There are additional obligations being made here, for example, on the decommissioning fund. But it's also a way to help, in part, just bring us together and think about this to make sure that we're all talking about the critical issues so nothing is missed. And that's why JDAs are quite common. Not required in every case, and there are cases where they aren't done. But I think they're becoming more and more common, just to make sure that we're not talking past each other.
So in the big picture of this project, if there was no government subsidies, tax breaks, whatever it is it financially feasible?
Can we take that one?
Go for it.
Sure. So,
They asked me that.
Yep. The short answer is yes. I mean, the reason that National Grid is here It's because they believe it's a good project. We believe this is a good project location. And of course, they are in the business of building projects and making money from doing that. And so the current dynamic, the current tax structure supports that. I think your question turned in part on the tax structure, and that's the federal tax structure. The ITC in particular is the one that applies most regularly, the investment tax credit, solar projects. There is value in building renewable energy from an ITC perspective. And there's also similar value in building wind projects from a PTC perspective, production tax credit. There are variations on the theme. They ultimately make the energy that comes from these facilities a little more tax advantageous to those entities that have tax liability. So that does incent the projects. Similarly, there have been, over time, variety of tax incentives for mining coal, for giving access to federal properties for oil and gas. So this is not the place, nor am I qualified enough to have a full debate on that, but there are reasons why, at some level, these projects have some economic advantage over different kinds of projects. That being said, I want to go back to what I said a few minutes ago. You would not see this project or the projects that you're seeing in Wisconsin if solar has not gotten so cheap, and conversely, other projects in comparison are now more expensive, not only build, but to actually run. So the Columbia project, which we keep coming back to, is a plant that still has millions of dollars of undepreciated book value. I actually voted when I was a commissioner on putting scrubbers in that plant because at that point in time, we thought it had another 30 years of life left. Economics drive public policy. Am I happy that I was a yes vote on scrubbers that now have millions of dollars of unused value? No. But am I happy that despite that, these solar and wind projects are so affordable that they make energy still cheaper to shut down the coal plant and to build wind and solar? It's not as efficient as we'd like it to be, but it's the system that we have. I wish I would have had the forethought 10 years ago when I approved those scrubbers to know where we would be today. I didn't. But we're in a much better place economically now with the cost of solar and wind than we would be with the continuation of coal and gas. I'm setting aside because it's a politically laden value on your view on climate change, right? But you know, there certainly are climate change impacts from the kind of generation that we use. But we don't have to get there. Let's just talk economics. Economics, these projects are making sense for miles. That's why you're seeing this sea change in the industry.
Did the town of Beaver have any more questions? I realize we segued.
Sabrina, do you have any additional questions?
No, I don't have anything.
Sabrina, I'll connect with you after the meeting.
One thing I do want to make sure we understand when we walk out today is if the ask is for us to redraft the JDA as to the county only, if you don't have the answer, I understand that too. But if it's a simple redraft where we take the other municipal entities out, and we can do it just with the county. Or if we want to keep going forward on the assumption that we're going to have the other counties attempt to sign this. Either way works for us.
Go ahead, Tracy.
So do you know if there's any snowmobile trails through any of that property that you are planning to put a project on?
The landowners haven't raised that to me yet. Usually they do, if there are. That being said, I know sometimes people can just kind of hop through the right of way.
I know it was a concern for rerouting if they would have had to. Or
Okay, what do we got?
What's in, there's one that goes from there, there's one that comes up.
Can we pull up the map?
Well, they asked, so we need to get it cleared up. Have to reroute. They have to know about it. So.
Bob?
So, yeah, how do we want to approach this? Do we want to, segregate the county from the towns? Or do we want to just move this forward and send it to the towns? I mean, Do you mind if I ask you, Tracy, what would you?
So what would be the point of not everybody being on one agreement? What would be the point if the sole purpose is this to be the agreement for all? Why would we, I mean, I guess I don't understand what the benefit would be.
I'll just say, I agree. I mean, as long as if a town wants something specific, it can be amended to that town. I don't see any reason to not leave anybody on there. And then let the towns say, here's the change we're looking for. So if the town of Clayton says, here's what we want, that's not in there, they can go ask for it and it can be changed for Clayton.
I think we can't do it just the one nuance that we would probably, if we've already had the county execute the document, we would probably then just do a separate side agreement with the local government that says, in addition to what you've agreed to here, here's a one-pager that says, here are these other issues.
Right. But it could be amended and changed for whatever the company and the town agreed upon.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think as we look at the potential impact on snowmobile trails, property owners, of course, private property owners have an enormous impact on our snowmobile trail system. But when it comes to the financial decisions that private property owners make relative to their properties, the recreational trail system that we only have in place for several months out of the year doesn't normally affect their thinking. In my mind, considering we have a fabulous asset here in Polk County, the recreational trail viewer, it'd be extremely simple to overlay the recreational trail viewer on the, on that section of the county to see what the actual impact is today. Because I know that Ben has done a good job of keeping that recreational trail viewer as accurate as possible. Melvin can give us a description from looking at the snowmobile trail map on his computer, but I think the most comprehensive thing would be just an overlay of that. And I just think it's something that needs to be considered for whatever reasons.
Have a trail running through there?
Looks like it's right on the road. So how far is your setback off of the road? Off a town road, off a county road? What is your setback from the center of the road?
I would have to refer to the exact layout. I don't know if Jenny is still on and if she could chat that in, if she's listening or not. Or someone could chat. I don't feel like she is on it with that. That's something I can follow up with. It's the same standards that would be for any type of structure in the county. So you do have to have that handy in your head. I do not at this time.
Sorry, Jason's not here. I don't have it off the top of my head.
So we'd just be looking at the setback from the 33 feet from the center line realistically. And then the 20-foot setback from that, or give or take 20 feet, right? I think.
Neighborhood, yeah, depending on the road you're bordering.
Because if the snowmobile trail's in red there, it looks like it runs right along the ditch anyway on that road that it's going to affect before it gets to ducks. So that's where if the setback's big enough, I don't think you're going to have an issue and still be able to have the trail in the same place.
One property does go along the ditch line. The road that she talked about was going to be a dead end road. We're going to take over. Runs right along there, and there's a property north of that. They have. That's the only spot that isn't on the ditch line. And with the setbacks that you have, what are they, 100 feet?
100 feet from the base of the structure. That's the only one I do have memorized. I don't have it memorized for.
Which line's fine? Just that one dead end road there where you have the spot to the north towards range, the village or range. That's the only one that really bothers, because it goes into Duck's End is where it goes.
Well, that further adds to the reason why our alternate area is.
It is the alternate area.
Exactly. That's another strike against the alternate area, I guess. With the existing snowmobile trail there.
There's only green in north and it's only at 20 the way it looks.
So those are the kind of comments, for example, suggesting a hypothetical. If there's a snowmobile association up here or somebody who works and they want to point out why the alternate site is worse for snow machining than it would be for using the primary. That's the kind of public comment that's taken and looked at.
Just don't know how you're gonna go along, but your setbacks across the highway there, on the other side, where it runs along the ditch there, it's so far off that should be fine.
Agreed. We'll still confirm. Well,
I haven't been down there for a while, so I'm not real sure where it actually goes, but I don't know if you've been down there yet or not.
Any other questions?
One more comment. As a representative of the local county snowmobile association, I would just appreciate the consideration of this, because our snowmobile trails, whether it be in Polk County or around the state, are a very fragile asset to the economy of the counties and the states. And unfortunately, in the planning for large projects such as this, large highway projects, that kind of thing, our recreational trail system is normally not considered in the front end of a project. So, I just thank you for saying it, add this to the consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I'm just for clarification, the panels are made in China, right?
the proposed panels are being.
Those channels are, and Renewable Grids is owned by a European company.
National Grid Renewables is owned by National Grid Ventures. National Grid Ventures is the unregulated arm of National Grid. National Grid is most well known as a United Kingdom utility. They're the largest transmission owner and operator out there. They're also a utility out of the northeastern portion of the United States. They employ more people in the U.S. than we do in the U.S.
They're a huge utility in New England. They're massive.
Do you have the ones in Minnesota and Tennis Falls? Is that you guys?
We do have, it's been so long, but there is a couple projects that at the time it was Vermont that developed in Chicago County. Off the top of my head, I don't exactly remember the project locations or names. They were ones I worked on when I was about 5 years ago now.
I'm almost 10. My grandfather's farm is one of them farms, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the big fence being around it. When he said 8-foot fence, I was curious because I don't think there's an 8-foot fence around it. The one is the one down in Scandia, that has a fence around it, but not very high. And the one,
The minimum requirement with National Electric Code is a 6-foot fence with 6-foot chain link fence with a foot of barbed wire, 3 strands. You can have deviations from that, which would be, again, it depends on some rulings with jurisdictions, but more often than not, you're at your base, you're 6 feet with some additional add-on. 8 feet is what I've been seeing implemented, has dug into quite a bit in Wisconsin as well as Michigan, and the influence of that being the DNR.
if there's 2 miles of Tennis Falls, there's 3 sites.
Okay, Melvin. So do we want to go ahead and move forward with looking and sending it to the county board?
Where are the towns at on this? we wouldn't be here probably discussing this if they weren't in favor.
I haven't heard anything. I mean, Bill can attest, we've talked about every update that has came about. You know, I don't think there's an
Well, I
issue
don't-
on our end.
I don't see anything. Yeah, I guess just because it's on the screen, I mean, those numbers are realistically just preliminary until the state says, here's what they are. So I guess in that draft, it would be nice that it stated that, you know, so that the county, the towns realize. Oh,
Bottom of this page, we do have that footnote. Sorry, maybe it's the, is it the footnote? There it is. Yeah, it is. This one. Sorry. Yep. So we acknowledge that the allocation is based on current project design and at the time of execution of this agreement, including no payments to Beaver because there are no primary array panels located there. These amounts and recipients may change based on project design.
okay, so it's there. Okay.
Well, these are estimates. They're quite close. I mean, you're not going to, if the project is built as filed, this is what you're going to get.
So it has to be 100 megawatts to go to the PSC, right? What if when you're done building, it's 99?
So this is an issue that is, you should go to law school. A lot of lawyers talk about this all the time. This is an issue that comes up and I don't think has ever actually occurred. So the statute is 196.491 in Wisconsin statutes that addresses this issue. And it says you need a CPCN for a project to be built at 100 megawatts capacity. And what that acknowledges and what does happen all the time, and it's more common with a coal plant or a gas plant, you can build a 500 megawatt coal plant, but it ramps, right? So it's not operating, and it may even go below 100 megawatts. But the statute acknowledges operation is different than construction. The finer point is if you get the approval to build at 100, but actually build less than that. I don't have an answer for you. I think the conclusion, it's a good faith approach. You're going to the commission because you're building a project that's 100 megawatts or larger, and that's what the statute requires. And so you are going to build that project at 100 megawatts or more. There are going to be quarterly filing requirements. Assuming the project gets built, National Grid or if somebody else buys it will have to file quarterly reports that shows construction status, that shows money spent, and then shows operational dates and capacities. And I don't recall there ever being a situation where somebody has built above 100 or has gotten approval to build above 100 and then has built less than that. How I think that would play out is if we're talking about 99 megawatts, you know, I don't think that'll matter, but it'll become obvious in the filings, right? Conceptually, somebody could complain about that. But it's challenging to unring the bell at that point, right? If it's 100 megawatts and it's substantially less, that's a different situation, right? I don't contemplate that happening.
What if?
I know people at DW Law School, just throwing it out there for you.
He is in charge of the Clam Falls Legal Department. On his own accord, though, we might put that out there.
Hey, the degree came right from the Cracker Jack box.
Brad Law.
Because it takes the 100 megawatt to go to the PSC, right? And so at 99, we're back to county approval and town approval and not state approval. Any other questions? Come on, Tracy. Okay. Anything? So are we okay with moving it to the board? That's what we're looking for, right, Bob?
It's a potential outcome from today's session, yeah. Yes, sir.
As long as the final draft has everything in that we've encompassed.
We have a clean copy. I think that's what you're seeing right now. So the major addition is that educational fund. And just, do you mind if I ask about that?
That clean copy would come to us, if nothing else, in the county board packet, right? If we send it to the county board, just so that we would have another look at the clean copy before we were
Right.
saying yes, that's all I'm asking.
Can I ask about the educational fund, Chairman Olson, or no?
Sure.
Just to be clear, so we're looking at roughly $400,000 to be shared between Amory School District and Clayton School District over 20 years.
Correct.
So, and then with Amory getting 80% and Clayton 2,000, so that's an annual 20%. So that's, yeah. And then, so how does that work? Will those school districts go to the towns, like for example, Lincoln and the Amory School District? Are they working? Are they communicating together? And do they know about this? I'm just curious about the school district's perspective.
Yep, so Amory and Clayton, through communication with me and their numbers, this is what we've arrived at. So this is both Sean and Ed's decision for how it's going to be shared amongst their districts. And the reason it's just these two districts is that is the only school district that the project has, touch points and the locations in. So with that, this is how they thought it would be good to fix and memorialize the revenue such that it was just easy, straightforward. When it changed, their enrollment stays fairly consistent over the years in terms of percentages and how it's looked historically. So this was a good number. So this is with their input and approval, and I've been working with Ed and Sean over, since we started outreach with the towns and the county back in the summer of 2020. I'll actually be at the Amory School Board meeting next month as well. So that's part of our, usually schools in one way, shape, or form are oftentimes supporters of these projects because of the revenue associated with them. In other states, usually, well, I can let Eric get into taxes here, but essentially the community fund helps offset and also increase the revenue that the school would be getting now from the agricultural use base. Our intent is with community fund and education as our company, we want to invest in the communities we're in and go above and beyond what is required. So they were this is their decision for how it's being shared, not mine.
So the education fund is going beyond the ad valorem, that payment in lieu, right? Or is it a part of the?
No, so it's separate from that because actually the way that the utility revenue payment works, it goes directly to the jurisdictional body and skips that school district. So if, for example, the county wanted to allocate funds from this revenue to the schools, you could do so, but you're not required to do so. So this community fund helps supplement the revenue that they're missing from the existing use taxes that would be coming in on the property. But yeah, goes about that. It's more the in crunching numbers, and I believe we provided you. I know I gave it to Tracy, but the revenue for tax revenue for all of the entirety of the footprint of the project for the last 3 years hovers around about $15,000. So the proposed revenue with the utility formula and the community fund is substantially more than that.
Kara, so would you pick up another school district, say you had to use Beaver as an alternative?
Nope, we wouldn't. No, they're Amory. The only portion of the project that is in Clayton is Clayton.
Beaver Town, a substantial amount of that is in the Turtle Lake School District.
Not the portion of this project.
Okay, gotcha.
So, any other questions? Somebody wants to make a motion?
I'll second
it. Motion is made and seconded to move it to the full board. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Tracy?
I did.
Oh. All right, motion is passed on to the full board. And we will get a copy of that then, only because we meet again the day before the full board. So if this comes out, if this was sent out in our packet again next week, if somebody here had if we've seen an issue with it before the county board, it could be brought up at the county board night at least. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Sorry about my digression on energy policy. You gave me the forum though, so I had to go. Thank you.
All right, Mo, you're up.
I just have a quick update for you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Just a quick update on property listings. I got 4 parcels here. The top one is 160th Street. It's basically a private dead-end road on 7 residents. The township does not want to take this over. We've reached out to them several times. What I'd like to do with this is get permission to work with Polk Council to deed these sections of road back to these landowners as their own access. That way the question of maintenance on a county-owned property doesn't come forth on that one.
Are we okay? I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Yep.
The second 2 in the middle are down in Wanderoo, town of Garfield. I'm going to be working with the town chairman to try to clarify the legal issues on this. The town is interested in these, so I'll be working on those 2. The third one down below is on the Wilburg Avenue behind Menards. This was the one property that we did have a buyer on, but he did not follow through with his contract. So I would like permission to list this with the property lister that we have with the adjoining properties. And try to do that commercially with our realtor on there. So that's kind of the status update on these ones. Just looking for permission on that last one to list that with the realtor also.
Is that piece right next to the other one that's already listed?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It might be more appealing to someone that all the properties are right there.
So you're just looking for the okay on this last one, more to relist it with a realtor rather than put it on the auction?
Correct.
I'm fine with that. We can do that by consensus, Malia? Okay.
Fantastic. That's it.
All right. Let's jump to 10. Is Jason available? Is that okay if we jump to 10 and just get Jason done first?
Ben's is gonna take a while anyways, right?
All right.
Ben's will take a while anyway.
Online thing.
Okay.
I'll survive. Hey, good morning. what you have back in front of you is a plat in the town of Sterling to create 8 lots. The plat would be called Parkside Acres. The town has approved of it. Everybody signed off on it that we need to have that sign off on it. All the lots have access on 2 town roads. It's a corner 40. One town road right here, and then one town road right there. So you can kind of see just nice layout, 5-acre lots, 2 of them with flag lot on it. So it's pretty straightforward. These are ordinance requirements, and this is the final approval before it can be recorded.
This is the same one that we discussed before.
Yep, correct. And that was, and that we did do the 30-day notice that's required after we got the final copy of the plat. But it was in a preliminary stage a couple months ago before you. There's just some noticing requirements that we have to do and time delays. So.
You need a motion.
Yeah, motion to approve.
I can make that.
All right.
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded to approve the Parkside Acres plat. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Jason.
You got
5-minute break.
okay with me.
We get the 5 minutes break. specific thing, you can go to that search bar up here if you know what you're looking for already. If you don't, if you have a general idea what you're looking for, use that little dot with the eye, and that will help your search, and it'll start real broad, and it'll take you right down to a specific asset. The other cool thing with this map, you have the different base maps, satellite imagery, or streets. This is all user friendly for mobile devices. So if you pull this up on your cell phone, it operates just the same way. And another great feature, on the screen it's a little different, but this will GPS us. So you can use this as a GPS on your smartphone. It also is working with our computer here. So there we are, that little blue dot. Right there. So say if you are somewhere up in, by Summers Lake, and gosh, what the heck is there to do up here? You can turn on your GPS on this map and open up the map, and it'll show all the recreational amenities around you. That's a real quick run over of the rec viewer. We can certainly talk more about it if you guys have any other specific questions.
Go ahead. It isn't really a question, but after the last meeting, I went home and I did make it that far.
You made it to where you can see yourself?
Got to the map and, looked at that, but I never would have known to use that eye up there. I mean, that's the part of being a novice. I don't know to get to the second level. Sure. Is there any way that can be presented there somehow? I don't know anything about computers.
I am certainly not a computer expert, but I would have to think that there's a way to make that more obvious. That icon, with a label or something like that. Identify is what that means. That circle with the eye is the identify feature. And that's a fairly standard feature across quite a few different mapping platforms.
If you hover over the eye, it tells you find a recreational amenity.
I didn't even know to look at it.
So if you're somebody other than Doug and myself who knows nothing about computers, you probably know what that eye means.
Yeah.
If you're out there looking on your phone, you probably, yeah, but I agree. I would not have a clue what the eye means. So yeah, I'm all in favor of if you could identify it somehow to say.
Look at what it says up there though when he hovers over it. There's a line on it.
Ben, the county could do what other sites do is put a short tutorial on the county website how to use the recreational map viewer. You make Tim do it. He's not here. I can say that. And you give a 3-minute sample how to use this viewer. And then other places have done that.
Lost Brad and I with.
I'm just shaking my head, yes, hoping I'm right.
Yeah, that's right.
You're talking about putting a video, just a sample, a little snippet of how to use this, just a 30, 40-second thing on the website. Right on the main page then before you would click on to go to this. Yeah. Yep.
It's easier than changing programming, making an eye.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. We're going to skip 11 for now, and we're going to also skip 12C, and we'll see at the end of the meeting if we come back or just push them out to the next meeting.
Well, good morning, everyone. I guess it's still morning. So the first couple items I have is just kind of an update for you folks so that when you see it in the paper, you've kind of heard it from me first. Don't need to do anything. However, the third agenda item could be good discussion. So being that everyone's got a packet, I guess I'll go over the timber sale prospectus. Basically going to be sending that out this afternoon or sometime this week. The ad will run in the paper next week. We'll be back on it March 2nd because, of course, you guys need to approve all the bids that are received on the timber sale. We're putting out 8 tracts, 371 acres. It has 245,000 board feet, mostly of oak, and 8,800 tons, just north of 8,800 tons of pulpwood, with a minimum bid of $61,809. Usually they come in above the minimum bid, a lot going on with mill closures, etc. Any questions on the timber sale bids?
So that was my question, Mark. I mean, has pulp become, is it, a few months ago, it was pretty much worthless. I mean, has the market changed at all, or?
The market is still down. Basically, what's moving right now is all the saw logs. So if they can make a 2x4 out of it or an oak board, anything like that, that stuff is moving really good. When you cut a tree down, however, you just can't cut the saw log out of it and leave the rest of it in the woods. So to give you an idea of our minimum bid that we would accept on oak last year was $4 a ton. This year it's $1 a ton. So yes, the pulpwood is kind of a dog right now, crap.
Okay.
Moving on to planting bids, I'm also going to be sending those out this afternoon. I was originally going to do that later in the month, but due to COVID, I want to get this out so folks can get a crew assembled, get their order documents in play and all that good stuff. Did a little bit of research and sending the bids out to entities that are within the state. That way they don't have trouble crossing the border. So I'm moving that up a little bit just due to COVID. And I'd like to get bids on that. I've got 107,000 trees coming, and I hate to have me and Paul plant them all. So
That'll help.
So that I'll bring back. It'll be the second Environmental Services Committee meeting in March. Moving on to the trail, more specifically the ATV, UTV.
Chairman Olson? Yep. Mark, I think we might postpone this. Is that?
Okay.
Yeah, or at least wait and see what time we get it, because we have to go into closed session. So we'll at least punt on it for now and see what time we come out of the closed session at.
Okay.
Chairman Olson, do you want to do 11A real quick? I mean, we could just, it would only take a minute or two.
Let's do it when we come out. Let's do it when we come out of closed session. Let's get the closed session done with. So do I need to read this off, Malia, or can we just have a motion to go into closed session?
You don't need to read it off. It's clearly stated.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Roll vote. Roll call.
Yep, but we need a motion first.
Oh, that's, sorry.
Motion by Sharon, second by.
Yeah.
Okay, roll call vote to go into closed session.
What?
Carol? Supervisor Rowdy? Yes or no?
Vote to go into closed session. We have to vote out loud to go into closed session.
Oh, that's what I was waiting. I didn't hear you. Aye.
Yep, we have to vote individually.
Oh, Yes.
So, all right, Tracy,
Yes.
Sharon,
Yes.
Brad, yes. Is Jason in on this?
Justin, yes.
Justin, sorry, I'm used to his brother.
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. Okay, so, Malia, for this, does Justin have to leave?
Doesn't include,
You could, as chair, designate those who can remain in.
Okay. He can remain.
Just,
You want me to send that to
the rest of it,
No, I got it. Just, I can take it right off the website.
Okay, so before we start, Bob, I mean, we're off video-wise and
Yes, sir, I'm doing that right now. Thank you.
I need roll call coming back out.
so,
Is that you?
No, it's just going in.
Really?
so do we want to discuss the possible action regarding possible development of an ad hoc ag committee? Or do we want to punt and kick that and 12C, County Forest Trail down the road to the next meeting? I'm fine either way.
Me too.
Me too. I'm good. We can.
For next meeting?
You were good for the next meeting or?
No, for this one, I thought we just,
Okay.
come on. Jeez.
You're trying to make it easy for Kim when he's back in 2 weeks. Look at how long these meetings are done. All right, let's start with 11 then, Bob.
Can I just set the table?
Yep.
Okay, this initiative has been sent to us from the executive committee. I don't have a lot of context, but I do know historically Polk County has had an agricultural committee. And I think there's a desire to revisit that. I'm making the assumption that part of the transformation into the divisional model, that ag committee sort of got lost or divided up. But regardless of that, that was the directive from the executive committee. So not a lot of, beyond that directive, not a lot of other clarifying information.
Just a little bit, Bob, because I was there because, of course, Kim is gone. So Supervisor Bonaprise pushed this extremely hard, probably, I'll say, very hard at least, of forming a group to look at agriculture issues that come before the county board. It would be truly an ad hoc advisory committee. Something on the order of PTAG, Vince, Malia. I mean, something that would only be advisory in nature. And I don't know even how often they would meet, but it was the executive committee, you know, said send it to environmental services, see what happens. Like I say, this comes from Supervisor Bonaprise.
So in my understanding, this is what John wanted in place before the lime quarry was sold. That was the whole intent of this.
It could be, yeah. I'm not gonna, yeah.
But it's moot point now.
That's what I
Totally.
would have been.
Why now?
I don't know. It comes strictly from Supervisor Bonaprise. I mean, that was.
Yeah, and the whole
that
intent,
was
like
the-
I said, was before the lime quarry was sold, This is what he wanted in place to kind of, it's over. It's done. Lime quarry's been sold.
Yeah, and we're not obligated in any means to move forward. Go ahead, Vince.
Just a thought, and I think, Bob, by bringing this up, is there are a lot of questions that would have to be answered before we go forward about what's its purpose, how's it going to look, what type of authority does it have, what we tried to do with the lime quarry was reach out to a group of farmers that we thought would be affected the most. We brought them in and talked to them and had their input to discuss it. That's one option. You know, I don't know what this ad hoc committee would look like, but it is something that meets regularly, or could it be something that if there's an issue that affects farmers, do we say, let's pull in a group of farmers? In this case, the last case, they were from the southern part of the county because that's where the lime quarry was and that's where most people use it. What if there's a farm issue in the north part of so I guess my thought is I think along with Tracy, that one issue is beyond. And so if we want to have added ag input, how might it look? Is it another ad hoc committee? Could it be another person like Justin sitting on this committee, as Malia had said to me? Maybe you bring in another person when it's an ag-related issue. As an option to, do we want to create a whole committee?
Yeah.
And then have to have bylaws or rules of engagement and that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think if a committee, if I know another individual on this committee was to be brought in, whatever it is once the issue has started, whatever the issue is, it's too late to bring, it's too late for that committee or that person to get involved at that time because it's already in front of a committee or the county board or whatever it is. It's hard to, close the door and back up and then make the committee once the issue is already out there.
I see what you're saying.
But like I say, I don't.
I guess if this is John's true intent, we need to just know what obviously didn't happen for lime quarry purposes. But what is his intent with this committee as a whole, with the farmers? I mean, what is he hoping to accomplish by this? Or was it strictly, as I believe, just for the intent of the lime quarry? So I guess we need more information from John or from the executive committee. Because right now we have nothing to go on. What's it about? What's its purpose? I'm not for this.
Yeah, and it's here strictly for conversation purposes because, like I say, it was John's idea. It's how often would it meet? It certainly wouldn't be like PTAG or the four-wheeler group that has something in front of them at the time. It would be, if it was formed, I believe it would be a group that could sit there maybe a year and never meet, and then all of a sudden have to meet, 4 times in 4 months, or whatever the issue would be. I don't have a preference one way or the other.
But is the purpose to just convene when there's issues, or does John think it's something that should be ongoing?
Well, that's what we don't know. That's the unknown. I mean,
That's the big question. I mean, are we looking at an advisory special committee that tackles agricultural related issues as they arise? Or are we looking at a pseudo standing committee where we meet twice a month? That committee would meet for example, the first meeting in the month, deal with those ag-related issues. I mean, we could put wildlife claims, we could put forestry. I mean, you could go that far. And then the second meeting would be.
That's too far. I mean,
that's too far.
They would be just, well, no different than PTAG. I mean, they have something, they send it here to be worked on or voted on or whatever and sent on. And I guess that's what I would envision, and they would only meet on an as-needed basis. So when is that need? When would that come again? I think.
Right, so if it's advisory in nature, a special committee, it would need a purpose, right? So there's that. That needs to be defined.
So how would that be different than bringing, if it's about issues, than bringing those issues before this committee? I don't, I mean, I don't know that there would be a difference. I agree with Tracy. We don't know enough information to say this makes sense or this doesn't. I think sometimes in listening to John, he talks about how it used to be with ag, and I don't know how it used to be. So I don't know what he's referencing, what it used to look like in the old, before the new structure. I don't know. But he seems to think that.
I think under the administrative form of government, this committee is to deal with the agriculture issues. And I don't want to speak for Mr. Bonaprise. So he was thinking if we could go back to the format where we had an actual committee deciding on agricultural issues, that would be helpful.
And I think, Bob, I think you said one time you were here, but I mean, I think that kind of disappeared when we went from a 21 or 23 member board to 15, 7, 8 years ago, whenever it was. There used to be 8 or 9 committees. Now there's 4 committees realistically, so, and I think that's where, not speaking for Supervisor Bonaprise, but I think that's where he thinks it got lost. When I think at that point there was a true ag committee, or very close to a true ag committee at that point, when there was 8 or 9.
Right, they were the LCC, which you guys are now, the Land Conservation Council. So they played that role, but they also oversaw other departments like the ag agent and DW extension, similar to what we have done in the past.
So that's always been my feeling when John talks about, how it used to be. There used to be that committee that was, when it was a bigger board and more committees, that was
Focused on.
I'll say a little more focused on the ag end of things. But I'm fine with doing nothing or waiting until we just, let's wait until we, go ahead, Malia.
Maybe invite Supervisor Bonaprise to one of your next meetings and just, so some of these, if he does have ideas, he can decline if he's no longer interested or really, I think that would be.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Are we okay with that? I mean, we'll just invite John whenever he's back. So that could be March or April. Just invite him and like Malia said, he can say no, or he can pick up the phone and call all of us and say, here's, what I was looking for, or, but he would have the opportunity to say, here's what I'm looking for at that point.
I like that.
We okay with that? Yeah, I mean, then that we don't need, just because it's been discussion, we don't need to set a date certain or just.
I agree with Tracy. I think it's after the fact.
Well, no,
I truly believe the intent of this was to take care of those issues before we did the rash of selling the lime quarry. That's what, in
I think so.
John, I believe that's And so
Yeah.
this for me,
That's what came
I don't
out of
know.
my phone conversation with John.
Yeah, and it could be, but, you know, it got booted here before the,
So this is I don't know, I'm not going there. It is what it is. Yes, we can talk to John. Not going there.
okay. So do we want to discuss consideration of a county forest trail use policy that could take a while or kick it down the road? I'm for kicking it down the road. It's not time sensitive in any way, shape, or form.
I'm finding that Mark gave us this printout, and then we can study it a little bit.
Yep.
And he'll give his presentation. See if we can get one for Melvin.
So,
Danny, you got one?
upcoming, subject matters.
Be a little sparkle. Can we get the copy for those guys? A copy of this?
One? I'll have one. We got them just before you went into closed session, Jeff.
Oh, yep.
We got them.
So when is our, wildlife damage claim coming back? Or is that?
That is on my list. Chad from APHIS would like to be at the next meeting.
Okay.
What I have for the next meeting is, I just want to emphasize the need for roughly 45 minutes for our farmer-led watershed. Horse Creek user group, they're going to present. They'll be here in person. I think there'll be 3 producers here in person on February 17th. They're asking for 45 minutes to present. Also, I would like, and I think this is up for discussion. We have been working on the Stour Trail, the rustic stage 1 piece. Would you think it's appropriate for us to update you on our progress on the February 17th meeting? I can. I mean, we could bring some pictures in. We have a project management chart. We also have a signage plan. Those signs have been purchased, so if that's of interest, because we have been out there working, and maybe that's an opportunity to disseminate that information.
I think people would like to hear that there's progress, you know, the progress that's being made.
Yep.
We can do that for you on the 17th. Well, I'll add that then, Chairman Olson? Okay. So, farmer-led watershed presentation, the update on the Stour Trail development. With zoning, we have 2 rezones. We assume they'll be non-contentious. Again, Chad from APHIS with the wildlife damage claims. I can and I will place in your February 17th packet the joint development agreement, the final version. And we'll work with the clerk to get that on the agenda for February 18th county board meeting. And I will send out a formal invitation to Supervisor Bonaprise about his position on the ad hoc ad committee. Beyond that, we might have something from Mo with tax delinquent properties. And we can bring back the discussion on the county forest trail use policy. That should take a little while. We have a template. It's basically just a set of rules and regulations that our current ordinance does not have. Our current ordinance is antiquated. It's dated back to 1987. So as we work towards building a comprehensive trail network plan and to provide our staff with information that they can provide those folks that are out recreating what the rules are, I think it's a good place to start. Obviously, they'll take a rewrite of the old ordinance, but we need to start looking at that. So that's why, if time's available, I suppose we can invite Mark back for that. So those are things I've identified. I don't know.
So do we want to like somewhat set a time frame for like Horse Creek watershed? I mean, the public hearings are going to be at 9:30, right? That's when they're published for.
No, we're going to push that later. Are they published for 9:30? I'll have to look at that. Thanks for that reminder. I have told our Horse Creek folks we're going to put them on the front of the agenda, but I'll work with Jason to see what's been published. It's 9:30.
Yeah, I mean, because typically we've been running them at 9:30, because that was my point is, there's no use the Horse Creek people being here at 9 o'clock.
Right.
If they're going to be after the public hearing, even if they're fast public hearings or rezones, it's going to be 10 o'clock, pretty easy.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll communicate that.
Yeah, so I guess if they're set for 10 o'clock, the rezones, then it'd be perfect if they were here at 9, but otherwise, I think, let them know that if they're here by 10 o'clock, that's plenty soon. I mean, we can always move things around to make it
We'll manage that.
10 o'clock.
So that's a pretty robust agenda as usual, unless you all have another suggestion.
Well, there's always somebody can call Bob if they've got something. All right, Sharon, you're up.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
All in favor? Aye.
So Kim, I did that.